Welcome to Earnings Intelligence. All right, I want you to picture this. It's the year 2000. The massive party that was the dot-com bubble, well, it's officially over. The bubble has burst, tech stocks are in an absolute freefall, and you've got investors just panicking. But, in the middle of all that chaos, there was this one company that wasn't just surviving, it was actually quietly thriving. So today, we are cracking open Berkshire Hathaway's 2000 annual report to find out how they pulled off a masterclass in winning when pretty much everyone else was losing.
So let's just take a look at the scoreboard for a second, right? In a year when the S&P 500, the benchmark for the entire market, lost a painful 9.1%, Berkshire Hathaway's book value grew by 6.5%. I mean, that is not just a small win. That's an absolutely massive outperformance. It really makes you wonder, what in the world were they doing that was so different from everyone else?
Well, here's the answer, and it comes straight from the man himself. With that classic dry humor he's known for, Warren Buffett basically spelled out their secret. He said they were buying the most boring, old economy businesses you could possibly imagine. Seriously, while the rest of the world was completely obsessed with clicks, eyeballs, and this whole new paradigm of tech, Berkshire was out there betting on the actual stuff that builds and furnishes our homes. So, to really get how this contrarian genius works, here's our game plan for today's deep dive. We're going to start with the dot-com hangover. Then we'll decode the numbers that really matter to Berkshire. After that, we'll look at their wild shopping spree, uncover a 2,600-year-old investment formula they use, and wrap it all up with a golden nugget of wisdom for you.
All right, first up, the dot-com hangover. We really need to set the scene here. The crash was that moment when, as Buffett perfectly put it, the pin met the bubble. Investors had to learn a very old lesson all over again. That speculation is at its most dangerous when it looks like the easiest thing in the world. All that mania for tech companies with no profits just evaporated. And suddenly the market was scrambling, desperately looking for something real, something tangible.
Buffett even made a joke about it. He said that by buying Acme Brick, Berkshire had finally become a true clicks and bricks company. And that little joke, it perfectly captures their whole strategy. See, it was never about rejecting technology. It was about demanding real value, whether that value came from an online insurance quote or a literal brick. So let's dive into the specifics of how they actually did it. Okay, so to really understand Berkshire, you have to learn to speak their language. And believe me, it is not the language of price to eyeballs or cash burn rates that everyone was talking about back then. No, their language is built on just a few core, time-tested financial ideas that really anchor every single decision they make.
So first up, we have book value. The easiest way to think about this is just the simple, official, on-the-books accounting value of the company. And as you can see, it's a pretty powerful way to track their long-term progress. I mean, look at that, growing from just $19 a share all the way to over $40,000 by the year 2000. But, and this is key, Buffett's always the first to tell you that this is just the starting point. It's the raw data. It doesn't tell you the whole story.
And that brings us to the concept that they really care about, intrinsic value. So unlike book value, which is all about what a company's assets are worth on paper, intrinsic value is an estimate of its real, true economic worth. It's all about asking the single most important question. Over its entire lifetime, how much cash can this business generate for its owners? That right there is the North Star that guides every single one of their investment decisions.
Now, this right here illustrates their secret weapon, insurance float. Buffett's description is just perfect. He calls it money we hold but don't own. The best way to think about it is like a massive interest-free loan from all their insurance customers. And in 2000, they had almost $28 billion of this stuff to invest for their own benefit. This float, this is the engine that powers the entire Berkshire machine.
Okay, let's get to the action, because this is where it all comes together. So they're armed with all this financial firepower and a crystal clear philosophy. So what did they do while the rest of the market was completely melting down? Well, they went on one of the biggest shopping sprees in their entire history, spending about $8 billion in cash. And just take a look at what was in their shopping cart. The world's largest carpet maker, a legendary paint company, insulation, bricks, and Western boots, furniture rental, a jeweler. I mean, these were all tangible, profitable, and understandable businesses. They had real products and real earnings. They were the absolute opposite of the dot-coms that were just imploding all around them. So you might be asking, how did they even find these deals? Was it through hostile takeovers or some complex investment banking wizardry? Nope.
As Buffett says, their technique is simplicity itself. They just answer the phone. That's it. Because their reputation was so strong as this permanent hands-off home for great businesses, sellers started seeking them out. They became the buyer of choice. And when that phone did ring, they ran every single opportunity through this famously simple checklist. Is it big enough for us? Does it have a history of consistent earnings? Is it a good business with very little debt? Is management already in place and are they going to stay? Is the business simple enough for us to actually understand? And maybe most importantly, do they have a price? That's it. No complicated projections, no turnaround stories, no technobabble. Just disciplined, old-fashioned common sense. So, you have to wonder, what's the deep intellectual framework that holds all of this together? You might think it's some super complex algorithm, right? Well, it's not. In fact, Buffett says their core strategy has been around for, well, about 2,600 years. And that's it. The entire Berkshire Hathaway valuation model is basically just an extension of this simple fable from Aesop. A bird in the hand is worth two in the bush. It all boils down to valuing the certainty of cash you have today versus the promise of getting more cash sometime in the future.
Okay, that sounds great, but how do you actually turn an ancient fable into a practical financial tool? Right? I mean, how do you use this piece of wisdom to decide whether to buy stock in Coca-Cola or to buy a whole carpet company?
Well, Buffett says it's simple. You just have to answer 3 questions. Number 1, how certain are you that there are actually birds in that bush? Future profits. Number 2, when are those birds going to emerge and how many of them will there be? And finally, number 3, what is the risk-free interest rate? That's the return you could get today risk-free from something like a government bond. If you can answer those 3 questions, Buffett says you can figure out the intrinsic value of any asset on Earth. And all of this brings us to our final takeaway, the golden nugget. Because beyond all the numbers in the ancient fables, there is one core habit of mind that makes this entire system work. And it's not just financial genius. It's a deep, deep commitment to something called intellectual honesty. I mean, just think about it for a second. Most companies are masters of spin, right? They shout their successes from the rooftops, but they whisper or they rationalize or they just completely bury their failures. Buffett points out that in most boardrooms, you will never see a truly honest discussion about a bad decision. But Berkshire? They do the exact opposite. They publicly, openly acknowledge and analyze their mistakes so that they can actually learn from them. And believe me, this isn't just talk. In this very report from 2000, Buffett openly admits to his massive mistake in buying a company called Dexter Shoes. He even says he compounded the mistake in a huge way by paying for it with Berkshire's own valuable stock. I mean, that level of public self-criticism from a CEO it's almost unheard of. It builds an incredible amount of trust, for sure, but more importantly, it creates a culture where learning from your mistakes isn't just allowed, it's absolutely required. So the final thought I want to leave you with is this. The most powerful tool that Berkshire used during the dot-com crash, it wasn't their cash and it wasn't a calculator. It was a ruthless commitment to intellectual honesty. Which really leaves us all with a question, doesn't it? In your own investing, in your career, or just in your life, what is the one decision you could go back and re-examine with that same level of brutal honesty to improve your own results?